Under the relentless sun of the Wyoming frontier, where the wind whispered secrets through the sagebrush and the horizon stretched like a promise unkept, Elias Thorne stood frozen on the splintered wooden platform of Dust Creek Station. His calloused hands gripped the brim of his weathered Stetson, knuckles white as bone, while the steam from the arriving locomotive curled around him like the ghosts of dreams long faded. He'd waited 3 years for this moment, 3 years of ink-scratched letters from a woman named Clara back east, her words painting visions of a shared hearth, soft laughter echoing across his lonely ranch, and a life stitched together from the frayed edges of his solitude. But as the train doors hissed open and passengers spilled forth in a haze of dust and expectation, it wasn't Clara's delicate figure that emerged, nor her promised parasol of lace and hope. Instead, a shadow stepped down, a woman clad in dust-caked leather chaps and a duster coat that hid the glint of twin Colt revolvers at her hips, her emerald eyes sharp as shattered glass, scanning the platform not with joy but with the feral caution of a cornered wolf. She was Riley Kane, an armed outlaw fleeing a bounty that stained the wanted posters from Texas to the Dakotas, and in that instant, as their gazes locked across the emptying train, Elias's world shattered like the crack of a rifle shot, leaving him to wonder if fate had delivered not his bride, but his undoing. If you believe in the quiet power of kindness and the redemptive grace of second chances, even in the wildest corners of the heart, hit that like button, drop a comment with your own story of unexpected turns, share this with someone who needs a reminder of love's stubborn persistence, and subscribe to Moments of Love for more tales that stir the soul. Your support keeps these stories alive, turning pixels into heartbeats. Elias Thorne had not always been a man carved from the unforgiving stone of the plains. Once, in the green hills of Kentucky, he'd been a boy with dreams as boundless as the bluegrass fields, racing bareback through meadows with his father's laughter trailing behind like a warm summer breeze. But the war had stolen that boy away, leaving in his wake a soldier haunted by the thunder of cannon fire and the hollow ache of burying brothers in unmarked graves. Returning to a homestead claimed by debt and despair, Elias had drifted westward, chasing the myth of reinvention in the vast, empty arms of Wyoming territory. There, on a patch of sun-baked earth he'd wrestled into a ranch with nothing but sweat and sheer will. He built a life from the bones of loss, a modest cabin with a sagging porch, a corral of sturdy mustangs, and fields that yielded just enough to keep starvation at bay. Yet the nights were the cruelest thieves, wrapping around him like barbed wire, where the silence amplified the echo of his loneliness, a void that no amount of hard labor could fill. It was in one such midnight vigil, porched with a lantern's flicker and a half-empty bottle of rye, that he'd answered an advertisement in the matrimonial news, a chance for companionship, for a partner in this solitary dance with the land. Clara's letters arrived like fragile birds, each one fluttering with promises of domestic warmth, recipes for cornbread that would melt on the tongue, tales of her skill with a needle to mend his torn shirts, visions of children with his strong jaw and her gentle eyes. Elias poured his replies onto paper with the same devotion he gave to breaking colts, his words rough-hewn but earnest, weaving a tapestry of hope that masked the scars beneath. He sold a prized mare to afford the train ticket, planted an extra row of wildflowers by the cabin door, and marked the days on a fence post until the calendar bled into this fateful afternoon. Now, as Riley Kane strode toward him with the purposeful gait of someone who'd outrun devils and dawn alike, Elias felt the fragile structure of his anticipation crumble, replaced by a storm of confusion and quiet fury that twisted in his chest like a knife. Riley Kane was no stranger to shattered promises, born in the shadow of the Rio Grande to a mother who'd sung Mexican lullabies over a campfire and a father who'd taught her to shoot before she could spell her name. She'd learned early that trust was a luxury afforded only to fools and the fortunate. Her life had been a whirlwind of border skirmishes and saloon brawls, where the line between survival and sin blurred like heat haze on the horizon. At 17, she'd fallen for a silver-tongued gambler who promised forever in the flicker of a lantern-lit cantina, only to wake to the sting of betrayal when he vanished with her savings in her heart, leaving her to fend for a ragtag band of orphans she'd half-adopted in a fit of reckless compassion. That wound had festered into a firestorm of vengeance, drawing her into the outlaw trade, rustling cattle under moonless skies, holding up stagecoaches with a bandana masking her fierce beauty, always one step ahead of the lawman who hunted her like a rabid dog. But the letters, oh, those cursed letters she'd intercepted from a dying courier in a dust-choked Arizona way station. They'd been meant for Clara, a fragile spinster fleeing her own cage of spinsterhood and societal scorn. But Riley, desperate for a fresh start and a face the bounties hadn't yet branded, had seized the opportunity like a lifeline in a flash flood. She'd burned the originals in a fit of guilty flame, memorized a script of affection, and boarded the train under a stolen identity, her revolver's heavy reminders of the blood on her hands and the ghosts at her heels. Stepping off in Dust Creek, she saw not a savior in Elias's rugged frame but a mark, a temporary harbor in the tempest of her flight. Yet as his blue eyes, weathered by wind and want, met hers with a mix of bewilderment and unspoken plea, something stirred in Riley, a flicker of recognition, perhaps, in the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of dashed dreams, mirroring the invisible burdens she carried strapped to her soul. The first days on the ranch unfolded like a tense standoff in a sun-bleached arroyo, where every glance held the potential for gunfire and every shared meal simmered with unspoken accusations. Elias moved through his chores with the mechanical precision of a man nursing a fresh wound, repairing the windmill's creaking arm at dawn, his hammer strikes echoing his inner turmoil like thunderclaps in a bottle, branding calves under the midday blaze, the sizzle of iron on hide a pale echo of the burn in his betrayed heart, and at dusk, mending fences that stretched like the barriers he'd unwittingly erected around his fragile hopes. He barely spoke to Riley, his words clipped and sparse as winter rations, directing her to the spare room with a curt nod and a meal of beans and biscuits left cooling on the table. Inside, the struggle clawed at him relentlessly. The ghost of Clarice letters haunted the cabin's corners, their phantom ink accusing him of folly for believing in mail-order miracles, while the ranch's isolation amplified his isolation, turning the vast sky into a mocking canopy over his solitude. Nights found him pacing the porch, pipe smoke curling like unanswered prayers, wrestling with the urge to send this intruder packing back to whatever hell she'd crawled from, yet bound by a code of frontier honor that whispered against abandoning a woman alone in these lawless expanses. Riley, for her part, navigated the ranch, with the wary grace of a Mustang newly caught, her hands more accustomed to the reins of a stolen horse than the handle of a skillet, burning the first batch of cornbread to a crisp char that filled the air with acrid regret. She watched Elias from afar, noting the way his laughter had withered to a rare rumble, the lines etched around his eyes like canyons carved by unshed tears, and felt an unwelcome pang of empathy pierce her armored resolve. Her own demons nipped at her heels, rumors of Pinkerton agents on her trail, whispers carried on the wind from passing drifters about a posse gathering in Cheyenne, each shadow in the cottonwoods a potential harbinger of capture and the noose. She cleaned her revolvers by firelight, the metallic click a lullaby of self-preservation, but in the quiet hours, doubt crept in like fog off the Platte River. Was this masquerade a bridge to redemption or a plunge into deeper deception? The challenges mounted like storm clouds on the horizon, Elias's simmering resentment clashing with Riley's guarded secrecy, the ranch's unforgiving demands testing their uneasy alliance, and the ever-present specter of her past threatening to engulf them both in its vengeful blaze. Change began not with a thunderclap, but with the subtle shift of seasons, as summer's fierce grip loosened into autumn's golden hush, painting the aspens in flames of amber and crimson that mirrored the slow thaw in Elias's guarded heart. It started with small acts, unbidden and unspoken, Riley rising before first light to wrestle the pump at the well, her strong arms hauling water for the troughs while Elias still slumbered, easing the burden of his dawn patrol, Elias leaving a wildflower, a defiant purple lupine plucked from the ridge, tucked into the brim of her hat during a fence-mending ride, a silent olive branch extended across the chasm of their famed courtship. As the days blurred into a rhythm of shared labor, vivid scenes etched themselves into the fabric of their fragile bond. A late September afternoon when a sudden squall trapped them in the hayloft, rain lashing the tin roof like a symphony of sorrow, forcing confessions to spill forth in the dim, dust-moted light, Elias admitting the war's lingering shadows that made him flinch at loud noises, Riley revealing fragments of her orphaned youth, the gambler's knife-twist betrayal that had forged her into steel. Their laughter emerged tentatively at first, sparked by Riley's clumsy attempts at quilting a blanket from Elias's threadbare shirts, her stitches crooked as a drunkard's path, only to bloom into full-throated mirth under the harvest moon, where they danced awkwardly to the phantom strains of a fiddler's tune, her calloused palm warm in his, the stars above winking approval on this improbable duet. Suspense wove through their idol like veins of quartz in granite, whispers from the nearest trading post of strangers asking after a green-eyed woman with a scar on her left hand, the distant thunder of hoofbeats that sent Riley bolting to the ridge with rifle in hand, her heart pounding a war drum against the cage of her ribs. Elias, sensing the undercurrent of peril without grasping its depths, found himself torn between the pull of protectiveness and the fear of entanglement, his dreams now tangled with visions of her fierce silhouette against the dawn, a guardian angel forged in fire rather than the porcelain fragility he'd once craved. Through it all, emotion layered upon emotion, Elias grappling with the terror of loving what he hadn't chosen, the joy of her unexpected strength mending cracks in his soul he'd long deemed irreparable, Riley confronting the ache of vulnerability, her outlaw instincts warring with the tender bloom of trust, each shared sunset a step toward reclaiming the girl who'd once believed in forever. As winter's iron fingers clawed at the land, blanketing the ranch in a hush of snow that muffled the world's cruelties, the storm that had loomed finally broke with the ferocity of a blizzard unleashed. It came on a night when the wind howled like the damned through the cabin's chinks, and Riley, restless with foreboding, confessed the full weight of her deception by the hearth's dying embers, the stolen letters, the fabricated identity, the bounty that pegged her value at $5,000 dead or alive. Elias's face, illuminated by the fire's cruel glow, crumpled not in rage but in a profound sorrow that carved deeper than any betrayal, his voice a ragged whisper as he traced the scar on her hand, born of a bar fight she'd never spoken of, and murmured of his own illusions shattered twice over. Yet in that raw vulnerability, something unbreakable forged between them, a pact sealed not in vows but in the quiet resolve to stand as shields for one another, Elias vowing to hide her tracks, Riley pledging her guns to guard his hearth. The climax erupted 2 dawns later, when the posse crested the ridge like avenging specters, 6 hard-eyed riders with badges glinting under leaden skies, their leader a grizzled marshal whose vendetta traced back to a stagecoach robbery Riley had orchestrated in her wilder days. Bullets sang through the frosted air as Elias and Riley fought back to back from the cabin's barricaded windows, the acrid bite of gunpowder mingling with the metallic tang of fear, each crack of thunder from their revolvers a testament to the love they'd unearthed from the ashes of pretense. Elias took a grazing shot to the shoulder, the pain a white-hot brand that blurred his vision, but Riley's aim, honed by years of flight, felled 2 horses and sent the others scattering into the whitening gale, her cries of defiance laced with a desperation born of terror for the man who'd become her anchor. In the aftermath, as the snow drank the blood and the silence settled like a benediction, they collapsed against each other in the trampled drifts, breaths mingling in ragged clouds, the world reduced to the beat of 2 hearts sinking in defiant rhythm. From that crucible of chaos, their story unfolded into a tapestry of quiet triumphs and enduring grace, the ranch transforming from a bastion of isolation into a haven woven with threads of hard-won intimacy. Elias's wound healed under Riley's steadfast care, her hands, once tools of destruction, now gentle as they changed dressings and stirred healing poultices, each touch a bridge across the gulf of their pasts. Spring arrived as a prodigal sun, greening the valleys and coaxing forth the wildflowers Elias had planted in hope, now blooming in riotous color around the cabin as symbols of renewal. They married not in a church's pomp but under the ancient cottonwood by the creek, vows exchanged in the hush of birdsong and river murmur, Riley trading her duster for a simple calico dress that couldn't dim her wild spirit, Elias's ring on her finger a circle of gold mined from his own stubborn faith. Challenges lingered, of course, the law's long shadow requiring Riley to forge a new name from the embers of the old, Elias confronting the ranch's lean years with a partner's unyielding support, but they met them as one, her sharpshooting skills turning back rustlers who eyed their herd, his patient wisdom guiding her through the softer arts of hearth and harvest. Children came in time, first a boy with Elias's thoughtful gaze and Riley's unyielding chin, then a girl whose laughter pealed like the Liberty Bell across the plains, their family a living rebuke to the fates that had once conspired against them. Years folded upon themselves like the pages of a well-loved book, etching silver into Elias's hair and faint lines of joy around Riley's eyes, their love deepening into a river that carved canyons through the stone of adversity, proving that the heart's true north could be found not in the expected paths, but in the wild detours where courage met compassion. As the sun dipped low on that final evening of reflection, Elias and Riley sat on the porch swing they'd built together from barn oak, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm a steady anchor around her waist, watching their grandchildren chase fireflies in the twilight meadow. The world had changed around them, the railroad's iron veins pulsing life into the once forsaken frontier, towns swelling with promise, but their ranch remained a timeless sanctuary, a testament to the alchemy of second chances. In that moment, with the stars pricking the velvet sky like scattered diamonds, Elias turned to Riley, his voice roughened by time yet tender as spring rain, and whispered words that encapsulated their odyssey, that she'd not taken Clara's place, but claimed a space no letter could have mapped, filling the voids with a fierce, unyielding light. Riley, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks, squeezed his hand, her outlaw heart finally at peace in the arms of the man who'd waited not just for a bride, but for the soul who would ride the tempests with him. And as the fireflies danced in luminous arcs, echoing the sparks that had ignited their improbable union, the story of the cowboy and his armed bride lingered in the air like a lullaby, a reminder that love, in its most profound guises, arrives not as a gentle knock, but as a storm that reshapes the soul. If this tale of unexpected love and resilient hearts has stirred something deep within you, Perhaps a tear unspoken or a spark of hope reignited. Please take a moment to like this video, comment below with how it touched you, share it with a friend who's navigating their own crossroads, and subscribe to Moments of Love for more stories that celebrate the beauty in our broken places. Your engagement doesn't just support the channel, it weaves you into this community of dreamers and believers, turning solitary viewings into shared journeys. And before we fade to black, here's a special request. In the comments, share one line from your own life that echoes the theme of second chances. What unexpected arrival reshaped your path? Let's fill this space with stories that inspire, because in every comment, we find a little more light. Thank you for joining this moment of love.